Today we're going to talk about elopement, kids running in dangerous ways. And we have several types of elopement we're going to talk about. So it's a big problem. It's a scary problem. It's something that we have to figure out and think through so that it doesn't happen again if it's happened to you before. It's happened to me several times. And so it all goes back to understanding your child's behavior. And Dr. Crone is going to give us and kind of walk through, give us some tips, but walk us through how to fix this behavior.
Okay, so elopement is the behavior we're going to talk about. And in the previous video, we had done a little walkthrough on the 4 functions of behavior. And that's just going to help identify what functions your kids have and how the behavior is operating. Because what's interesting is that although it all can look the same, running, any behavior can look the same, but for our purposes today, elopement can look the same, but actually function different. And what we have to understand is that if it's functioning different, then our intervention is going to be different. So you might have one behavior, but have a few interventions to make sure that it's working and changing. That's the most important thing here.
Okay, so let me just throw out some scenarios. I worked with a kid at church, and literally he would go out and we were in a fenced in area and he would just run. He would lap the place. So how do you deal with that?
Okay, so we look at our different categories that are kind of on the worksheet that you can print. And we look at, okay, that means he enjoys the feeling of running, right? He wasn't avoiding anything. He wasn't wanting to be chased necessarily. He wasn't trying to grab something from the other side of the playground. And so that's going to fall in our sensory category. And so when we look at that, that is definitely sensory. So that is different than the others. Okay, give me another one.
Okay, so my daughter specifically, when she was little, we would be working on whatever we were working on, and she would just get up and go to her room. Like she would just walk away.
Right, so she is wanting to avoid a task that's non-preferred, right? Like homework or whatever you're doing. So that would be escape. And that can even look like kids who you say it's time for bath, and then they're like running down the stairs and now you're chasing them. It's not because they want to be chased, it's because they don't want to get in the bathtub. Or a parent could say, hey, let's go get in the car to transition to someplace. And now you have a kid who's eloping out the door because they don't want to get in the car. And so that is the running or avoiding to a non-preferred activity or task, and that is escape.
What about if I am trying to get some housework done, maybe even trying to fold laundry, and she just starts running, trying to get out of the house?
Okay, so some of our kids will run for attention. How you know it's attention versus just liking to run, if they're not trying to avoid doing the laundry, is some of our kids will look behind us and see if you're following them. They will engage in lots of laughter, or kind of it becomes almost social, that running component, but that's the attention part. Or let's say someone gets up and runs in a restaurant, right? And they sometimes like the reaction that they're getting from other people. And so that can all be attention based, which is different than the other 2 you've talked about, which were sensory and escape.
Okay, so now I'm wondering about the scariest one for me. And I've had this happen. And my daughter saw a creek that she fell in love with. And the next time we went to that same park, she disappeared when we were on the swings and ended up in that creek.
Okay, so that could be put under the tangible category, right? So she's not running because she enjoyed running or walking away necessarily. She's not escaping something she didn't want to do. She wasn't looking for your attention directly. She was wanting access to something, right? She was interested in something. And we've had that happen. I've heard of that happening like potato chips, like down the road, somebody might go and like, oh, I want to go to that gas station because there's potato chips. And so that wandering can happen, and sometimes getting a tangible, or for example, like, another tangible example could be that if there's a kiddo who wants something in their backpack in a classroom and they run outside the door to get something out of their backpack, right? It becomes a tangible. So their entire motivation is to gain access to something they have their mind.
Like they have completely thought this through, and they are going to get that thing.
That's what they're trying to get to.
Yes, that they have not told you that they want. Yes. Okay.
There's an in game there. So we're going to walk through how to address elopement, and we're going to have the mindset of these 4 different categories as we address them, because you're going to see that it kind of changes how you address in the intervention based on which category it falls in. The worksheet we put together for you guys is one that you can print off that we've kind of filled in with some tips and suggestions. these tips and suggestions are just that. They're tips and suggestions. They're not an individualized behavior plan. There are definitely behaviors that you need to go and have a behavior analyst looking at the individualization of this. And so we just want to throw it out there. These are just tips and some strategies to use at home. And the first step to do before any of this is always prepare the environment to be safe. None of these strategies take the place of like safety equipment or locks on doors and all those kind of things that make it that important. So anyway, jumping in, here are 3 kind of steps that you're going to want to think through when you're thinking, I want to address this behavior and I want to change it. Okay. And so the first step is identify a replacement behavior. And that is just as simple as, what do you want them to do instead? Okay. And so in these cases, every single one of these, you're going to look at, becomes really important to look at requesting. What you'll see on this sheet is actually that we correlate this by color. So you can actually find the color of the behavior and then go find the descriptor of what to do. But requesting becomes so important. For sensory, a kid who likes to run, get them to start requesting that they want to chase or go run on the backyard, right? Get them to request running.
And so when you're saying requesting, for a child that is nonverbal, you do not mean only voice. What are other ways you can have them request?
Sure. So like a picture card. You could also do a sign, like through sign language. And then of course you can do verbal. So those are really important things. So we want there to be requesting behavior built to request these things that they want appropriately. And then the other thing we're going to want to do, so for example, with escape, we might want them to not just request to go run, because they wouldn't really request to go run. They're running for the purpose of removing themselves. We could add in asking them to request that they want to take a break. And sometimes that's okay and appropriate. We also want, as a replacement behavior, for example, with escaping, some things you can't escape, right? We can't just honor that they asked to escape so they get to go. And so what we want to do also is we want to make sure that we are allowing them to engage in appropriate behaviors. And so that is a fair expectation, is that one of the replacement behaviors is we don't want to avoid, but we want to be able to gain attention and activities and do things that are non-preferred. And we're going to talk about that in our next step on how to address that. And then things like for being tangible, again, it goes back to that requesting. The only change is they're not asking for run or to take a break. They're asking for what actual item they're requesting and wanting. So you can see that even though for 3 out of the 4 you're teaching and requesting, the requests change. For sensory, you're teaching them to request running. For escape, you're teaching take a break, right? And then for tangible, you're teaching them to have access to an item, to use the name itself. And so although it's similar, they're very different and you have to target it appropriately. Okay, so then the next step is, okay, so what do you do before the behavior, before we can anticipate somebody is going to elope? You're going to want to really look at having a plan to now teach this replacement behavior and practice it. And so you need to look at, with this behavior, how am I going to teach it? And all of these, common theme is teaching this prompting for a request becomes very important, but you have to do it like 10 times. It's not something you can just do once a day. So this is a routine you're putting in place. And in addition, you can add an additional reinforcer to it. So a tangible, an edible, or even something like a token. Oh, I like how you asked me to go run outside, or gave me the sign. Something else you can add here that is really simple, and we have one of these that you can print off, is you can put a stop sign on your door and it says ask to go. And you can actually put this in a routine that every time before your child opens the door independently, they first grab it and take it to you. And so it just creates a routine that if you're pairing that with reinforcement, again, a token, tangible, or edible, then it's a, hey, thanks, great job giving that to me. Now it's time to open the door. And it just gives that extra moment to reflect on what the next step is. And sometimes it won't be running out the door, it'll be finding you first.
Well, and I think it really, the stop sign goes with our kids, our rule followers. And so it will be so interesting to, if you have it right up there and they actually have to remove it before they walk out the door. And so you could even have a picture of stop sign and mom, you know, you have to go find mom, a picture of mom.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little simple thing that could be very impactful. And then the other few tips in here as we're planning for a practice for replacement behavior to be effective is For example, escape, right? So that's a little bit different. Doesn't have a lot to do with a stop sign because I'm wanting to go outside, but I might need to look at the non-preferred activity and adding reinforcement to it like we spoke about before, but then also shortening the duration of what you're asking them to do. So for example, they have to do a whole worksheet of math. Have them just do the first row in that sitting and then get up and go do something versus requiring like the whole worksheet. And that will decrease the value of leading. And so increasing the reinforcement for engaging appropriately, but also making the durations shorter can be really, really effective. And again, you're going to want to practice that requesting of taking a break or any of those kind of things 10 times a day. That rule still applies. And then attention, same thing. We're going to want to request if they're asking for chase or run or tag. We're going to want to make sure, again, prompting that to happen often, 10 or more times to follow that motivation. And then tangible, we're really looking at, again, we're wanting to get specific on them requesting the items that they're seeking with the name using a sign, picture, or verbal. And we're also going to want to do the second thing here. And this is different because sometimes the answer is no, right? So they want to go to McDonald's, but McDonald's is not available for us to go to right now. So we also really want to teach, no, we can't do this, but we can do this instead, giving that alternative. And if they are accepting of the alternative, we're adding another reinforcement. So you can kind of see this trend here is trying to really reinforce these replacement behaviors to take place of the problem behavior, which in this case is elopement. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is then have a plan for what happens if the behavior occurs. So let's say we're rocking it, we're practicing replacement behaviors, our kids are doing great with that, but then they engage in the problem behavior, right? It happens inevitably. And so what happens after the behavior is we want to have a clear idea of what to do. The first and most important thing is to make sure they're not coming in contact immediately with a delivery of reinforcement. And sometimes that happens because we think we're teaching the appropriate thing. And so we piggyback on, right? They run out the door, we grab them, we teach them to say run or a sign or whatever, communicate that. And then we say, okay, now go run. And then here's a tangible, right? It was too close together to teach it. So what happens when the behavior occurs is we need to stop the reinforcement as quickly as possible. Obviously, block dangerous elopement. Like we don't want that to take place. So you will have to chase your child even if they want you to chase them to stay safe. But then redirect them with as little attention as possible to come back to the original setting and start an activity that they don't prefer. Like, for example, a puzzle. If they didn't like a puzzle or something, go ahead and add a puzzle and then transition back into practicing 10 times that day the appropriate behavior. That really is going to be important. Remember, practice creates permanence, right? So we want to be very mindful of that. So these are just tips for addressing elopement. We have the sheet for you to print out so you can reference back and look at this. We have a blank sheet so you can go back and write in your own behaviors and thoughts. And this sheet can be used for a variety of behaviors, but today we focused on elopement.
Absolutely. And just a little recap. So you're going to try and figure out which type or what is the reason behind the behavior, and then you'll go through each of these steps. So I just encourage you to really print this out and then maybe go back over it because I think it was a lot of information and you're going to want all of it. So go ahead and print that out. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to see more videos like this, check out Sunshine in the Spectrum on YouTube, or follow either of our pages at Therapy and Beyond or at United in Autism. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Bye.